to start our work session with first joint work session with schools. On the Zoom video is Mr. Black from Western Carolina. Oh, Mr. Foreman hasn't. Mr. Thomas from Mattapanai, Mr. Seeley from Bowling Green, Ms. Long from Port Royal, Reggie Underwood from the Reedy Church District. We're asking that the board present us their information, and we will try our best to not interrupt, give you your time to get us going in the right direction in terms of your wishes and desires. I will turn it over to Dr. Rollins Fells, who will introduce her staff.
Good afternoon. We have Nancy Carson with us this evening, Mr. George Spalding, John Copeland, Calvin Taylor, Sean Kelly, and myself, Dr. Tawanda Rollins Fells. And so with that, Mr. Underwood, all of my board members are present.
Mr. Forehand, I believe, is on his way, so he's usually stuck in traffic, but so we're going to continue.
He's walking in right now.
He's walking in? Okay. We'll wait for a minute, Doctor.
I will follow your lead.
Okay. All right, you go ahead. We'll catch him up.
All right. This evening, for our Board of Supervisors, we have an agenda with some items outlined. If you'd like to begin with the discussion of our FY18, FY19, and FY20 year-end monies. And I'd ask that Dr. Calvary would please present our information.
Thank you, Dr. Rollins Fells. We recognize our time associated with our brief joint meeting this evening, and so we are going to embrace the drive-by highlights this evening. But certainly contact us if you have any additional information that you're seeking regarding what is shared this evening. So we invite you to open up the blue folder that has been provided to you. We do have all items in order according to the agenda. So we will begin with the carryover funds, as Dr. Rollins mentioned. We do have a request that we have presented to Mr. Colley and to Mr. Parton for inclusion in the consent agenda on February 9th at the Board of Supervisors meeting in relation to our carryover funds from FY18, FY19, and FY20. We had previously, in our October 6th joint board meeting, provided the Board of Supervisors with detailed backup information so that we could have unity and consensus surrounding the figures. So for FY18, we are discussing $213,502.70. For FY19, we are referencing $822,602. And for FY20, we have a very large carryover balance in relation to the impact of the pandemic closure, and that number is $1,967,315. At the end of each fiscal year, monies unspent in our operational budget automatically revert back to the Board of Supervisors, and so we are here to request the reappropriation at February 9th Board of Supervisor meeting of $3,003,419.70. That is an extensive amount of money, and we are eager to share with you how we hope to utilize these funds for one-time purchases or one-time facility upgrades. And so we invite you to look at the proposed carryover projects that we have included in the section of your folder. You will find that this document outlines approximately 2/3 of the capital improvement plan projects that you will be introduced to this evening in the FY22 budget. So in other words, we are requesting many of these carryover funds to address items that would be carried forward naturally into the FY22 CIP process. So we will not belabor the types of projects and utilize some of our precious time by reading line item by line item. But as you can see, all of these items that are included either, again, meet the requirements of capital improvement processes, meaning that they exceed $50,000, and they represent a substantial enhancement, renovation, or new addition to our facilities. Additionally, there are some one-time purchases that we tend to not have funding in our operations budget for, but yet they do not rise to the criteria level of the CIP process. And so for some examples of those would be the very first line item is a request for some new classroom furniture just due to normal wear and tear. And so that is an item that would not necessarily find its way into a CIP plan. And so we wanted you to have insight as to how we plan to spend the carryover funds. We do believe that the amount of carryover funds minus the pandemic impact are a demonstration of our stewardship of being fiscally responsible, and we look forward to seeing this included on your consent agenda on February 9th. We do ask that when this hopefully is approved that evening, that you also consider making a motion that all remaining carryover funds from the February 9th approval would then in turn continue to be pushed forward into fiscal year FY22. Reason being, you can see the extensive nature of the CIP list, and it would be a Herculean task to be able to accomplish all of these items by June 30, 2021. So we are asking that rather than having to come back to the board on June 30 in relation to FY 18, 19, and 20 carryover, that you in the motion in the meeting on February 9th afford us the opportunity to just continue marching forward with these monies. So at that time, this time I'll look at Mrs. Stevens, who is my right-hand money mama. I use that term as a term of endearment, and ask if she has anything that she would like to contribute to this agenda item before we transition to item number 2.
You have covered all that I have in my notes, so we are good to move forward.
Okay, great. So obviously we have afforded in time through Mr. Underwood's norms for our meeting some question and answer period. So we look forward to hearing any thoughts you may have at the conclusion of our presentation.
Did you want to take questions for item number 2? Let's go and do this one. That'd be easier.
Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is in relation to year 3 implementation of the 2018 CCPS compensation study. I do invite you at this time to go into your blue folder and pull out the documents that accompany this agenda item. We did provide some slides that were utilized during last year's FY21 presentation. We thought it was important to revisit what was presented. We know that you are fully committed to implementing the 2018 salary study as previously discussed. However, the pandemic, of course, did provide an appropriate interruption to your ability to implement year 3. We did state that we would revisit the ability of the Board of Supervisors to appropriate funds to the school division in January. So here we are today revisiting this topic. And I do think that it is important for us to talk about that any forward movement associated with year 3 during this fiscal year would be reflective of a shortened period of time. So if you recall, the cost associated with a year 3 compensation was approximately $1.5 million, as noted on the slide that you have in front of you. That was for year 3 implementation, and that was going to bring up our starting teacher salary to $41,800. And because we would be implementing this, and hopefully this in turn will find its way to the February 9th consent agenda as well, what we would hope you would see is that financially the cost associated with the year 3 implementation would cover the months of January to July, and the cost would there in turn be approximately $919,000 versus $1,551,452 for approximately 640 to 650 employees. We also need to be cognizant of the fact that we are experiencing a new minimum wage increase. In May, we have to pay all employees that do not receive a wage of $9.50. This dollar amount beginning in May, and $11 beginning January 1. And so those are some things just to consider. We feel very comfortable in being able to achieve the $9.50. We have very few employees beneath that. So the $9.19 would be adequate. and we will certainly enlighten you to the impact of the $11 minimum wage value when we present to you the FY22 budget. So just as some key reminders before I transition over to Ms. Stevens to talk about funding sources for the $919,000 from the Board of Supervisors, I just wanted to bring to your attention some continued trends. So if you are to look at the slide that is labeled 2020-2021 regional teacher salaries, you can see that we value our ability to remain competitive in our region, and that is critical to our recruitment and retention strategies. When beginning the salary study in 2018, Caroline fell in the bottom for regional competitors or for salary comparisons. So this slide includes 16 neighboring competitors, and it documents our continued inability to compete. We rank 14th out of 16 divisions for 0 and 5 years of experience. And that is a tremendous hindrance to our ability to recruit and retain high quality educators. This is of course in comparison to Chesterfield, Culpeper, Essex, Fredericksburg, Goochland, Hanover, Henrico, King and Queen, King George, King William, Louisa, Orange, Richmond, Spotsylvania, and Stafford. Only Essex and King and Queen counties fall below our 0 years of experience, and that gap alone is only $483. So that is a brutal reality that we continue to face, and quite frankly, even the third year of a 2018 salary study will not close this continued gap. We actually continue to see this gap because while we were doing the implementation over 3 years, neighboring regions were simultaneously giving salary increases. So that gap never narrowed, unfortunately. And so on the last slides, I will not spend a large portion of time talking about them, but they just serve as reminders of the need for us to continuously talk about the value of an annual step and an annual COLA, and how the power of that conversation and the understanding of the need for that annual step and the cost of $590,000 every year, that's what a step costs, is the only way that we can prevent compression. And we are already going to experience a compression issue when we look at that $11 an hour scenario, because we have already run statistics associated with that. And you can't just raise you can't just raise people to $11 and not adjust everyone else. That creates compression. In order to naturally scaffold that situation, we need $8.5 million. Let me repeat that, $8.5 million solely to address the $11 an hour minimum wage. So we know that's not feasible, but we have work to do, and we hope that we can move forward with year 3, close down 2018 salary compensation study, and start rolling our sleeves up for what needs to be done beyond that. So right now, I'll turn it over to Marcia, and Mrs. Stevens is going to highlight our analysis of potential funding sources that we've identified through our review of local government funds.
Good evening. With looking at the CAFR, the financial audit this year, and speaking with, or also having the staffing meetings with Mr. Kelly, the school system saw an increase of our sales tax during the pandemic, when everybody was thinking we were going to have a 20% decrease, I know is what Mr. Kelly was projecting. So at the end of the year last year, the county government side saw a 21% increase over budget for that sales tax revenue last year. So that was significant in coming through that pandemic the last 3 months, that there was an additional $500,000 there that was able to contribute. In doing the budget last year, Mr. Kelly stated that he was going to need $2.4 million use of fund balance to close out the year for FY20. However, in the audit report last week, Mrs. Wall stated that there was only use of fund balance of $1.7 million. So that is great that we were anticipating going in the whole 2.4 out of our fund balance, but only 1.7 out of the fund balance for the year. And we know those were those VDOT payments at the end of the year, making that last VDOT payment. So what we're looking at, the general fund balance currently has a $23 million balance, a healthy balance there, with $17 million unassigned. So with the sales tax continuing, hopefully this year, we are not seeing those large decreases. And speaking at our last staffing meeting, Mr. Cully is seeing the sales tax still continue on. We have 4 months in, and we at the school system are on budget. So we're not seeing a large decline this year. We are seeing a on budget. So not above budget as we saw a little last year, but on budget. So those are some areas in which we can see possibly could assist us in the short term of starting to review that January 1 review of the FY18 salary schedule we were not able to implement last year.
Yeah. Dr. Ellen Stiles, anything you would like to contribute associated with that topic before we transition?
I don't have anything additional at this time.
Thank you. So at this time, we will move into what we believe will be our third and final agenda item, just based on the remaining amount of time. We know that the capital improvement process is the process that occurs prior to the operations budget, so we think it's important for you to be privy to much of this information tonight, and certainly if we can transition into FY22 budget priorities, we'll capitalize on that remaining time. But I do invite you to pull out the capital improvement plan document that is in your folder. We are going to start on, we're going to skip through the first few pages. Those are more formalities that we utilized when we presented to the school board where they approved our CIP budget. And we're going to start right where that first pink sticker is. So if you all will go to the page that is initially dog-eared. And that should put you on goal 3 of our strategic plan, health and safety. You know that everything we do aligns with our strategic plan and our 4 driving goals. Many of our capital improvement plan projects are associated with crisis prevention and preparedness, facility maintenance, and health and wellness. So what we want to do is just walk you quickly through the photos, because I think photos speak volumes when you're talking about facility needs and enhancements. And I'm also going to simultaneously indicate you which of these projects we hope to pay for out of the carryover money. So you'll see just how much of this presentation would not actually move forward through CIP FY22 if we could naturally use our one-time remaining funds that were outlined in agenda item 1. So here we go. The first page that we want to reference is the annex. So talking about the facility that is sharing the same property as the central office. This houses our CDLC, or our Alternative Learning Center, and the Chesapeake Bay Governor's School. As you can see, we need some external work done to the windows. A portion of the building has already been renovated with new windows. However, there is a large portion that requires replacement. That is $80,000, and that has been pulled out for carryover funds. Gym lighting in the annex, that too has been pulled out to be paid for with carryover monies. And this gym is the annex gym, which is utilized not only by the CDLC students for physical activity and social emotional learning breaks, but it is also a source of activity practice for our athletics. Specifically, baseball utilizes that facility. Turning the page to Caroline High School, you'll recognize many of these requests have been ongoing for a number of years. We would like to install HVAC within our remaining CTE classrooms that were not implemented or not impacted by the bond upgrades when we did the renovation. The $300,000 has been removed and included in carryover. The CTE safety fencing, you know that our location of our high school makes external activity for students somewhat vulnerable in that we have a large highway going past. We have students out in the middle of the instructional day, and that requires that they have a safe place to operate during the school day. And so we'd like to put some safety fencing outside, which would allow our JROTC and also our shop classes to leave their bay doors open while they move in between the exterior workspace and the interior workspace. This too has been moved into carryover money. The final third item is is a photo lab at the high school that, in order to be highly operational, requires an upgrade of plumbing, which costs $28,000. This too would be included in the $3 million of carryover we are requesting on February 9th. Shifting to Caroline Middle School, we have been out of compliance in our safety audits, both at the middle school and the high school, in relation to bleachers. The middle school bleachers need to have handrails that would enable movement more safely up and down these bleachers. And so that costs $18,000 and has been included in carryover funds. On the right-hand side, lunch tables, $30,000, wear and tear, shear replacement factor, again included in carryover funds. Moving to our elementary schools, if you shift past the photos of the 3 buildings, that will be an indication of the fact that there are not wide scale needs from the middle school in relation to renovations at this time. So moving into the wellness aspect of goal 3, we're looking at athletics. Our stadium, which is utilized by many different athletic teams, requires a large upgrade to lighting. The lighting that is currently in place has been deemed outdated and not worthy of updating. So we need some new units there, and that would cost $250,000, and that is included in the carryover funds that we identified at the beginning of our time together today. The bleachers, also out of compliance, have spacing in between the seat area and the back side that would permit small children, if not cautious, to potentially experience a traumatic accident. And so we certainly want to prevent that, and that is costing approximately $120,000 to outfit the whole stadium bleacher space, and that is included in the carryover request. Softball field, we've talked many times as a joint board about the need to make some softball upgrades that would cost around $200,000. It would also help our softball area become ADA compliant. That's $200,000, and it is included in the carryover request. And then one topic that is near and dear to our high school and middle school wrestlers is an upgraded wrestling facility. As you can see, and we've talked about many times, the current location for wrestling, which is the trailer, is unacceptable. And so we are excited to receive carryover funds so that we can use $250,000 to build an outdoor building that is consisting of what? What is the fabrication? It is an outdoor metal building. Thank you.
Dr. Calvert, in the interest of time, would you highlight those things that are included in the carryover?
All of those are included in the carryover. Okay. Yes, that I've mentioned. The only thing that was not is that I did not mention is the stadium turf. That is not included in the carryover. That continues to be in CIP future requests. The following division needs: card readers of $110,000, buzzer systems $10,000, roof repairs $350,000. All past CIP requests that have gone unfunded, we would like to use carryover funds and would not move forward in the FY22 CIP process. That brings us to goal 4, organizational effectiveness, which covers fiscal accountability, talent management, and strategic planning. You can see on the maintenance page, we are requesting a dump truck, and you can see the quality of the current dump truck that our maintenance department is utilizing. This costs approximately $75,000, and we have moved that to carryover monies. The maintenance fleet vehicles also included in the, not included in carryover. We would like to see that become part of a cyclical process similar to buses for maintenance fleet. What was included in carryover, however, is the first phase of the 3-phase project associated with the building automation system enhancement, and that costs $140,000, which is the cost that phase 2 and phase 3 will also cost. Transportation, you can see we have the buses and the school car replacement. Both of those will remain in the CIP process. That has been a long-standing tradition that 5 school buses annually are included, and we hope to see that remain, plus the inclusion of school car replacement. And then we're moving into technology, which we're closing down our requests here. We need an uninterruptible power supply for technology that costs $10,000. That is also included in the $3 million carryover request, as well as the $188,000 of network switches. So that too would be included in the carryover request. The staff computers for $50,000 continues to be an annual need, and that will remain in the CIP moving forward. On the final page of photos outlining our CIP priorities, interactive classroom technology like the staff computers will remain as an annual occurrence that we would like to see continue through CIP processes. And the VoIP system for the phone handsets. We need $18,000 to replace those, and that has been shifted to our carryover request of the $3 million. So what that leads us to is, without access to the $3 million of carryover monies, is a total of $4,062,852 of FY22 CIP requests. With access to our former operational monies, which are now reversion monies, that leaves $1.8 million of FY22 CIP requests, which of course includes many of the things that you're doing on an annual basis, which is support of school buses and technology. So that leaves us with 16 minutes. 16 seconds. I'll turn to Ms. Stevens and ask if she would like to add anything.
Certainly. So in your packet, we have the original CIP for FY22 projects listed. We also have the revised based on the carryover amount. And very quickly, we had an air study that we were commissioned by RRMM and CMTA that was utilizing CRF funds. We will have a board debriefing, a report on that on February 8th. So we ask you to join in on that. We're looking at short-term cost of $1 million, 1.1 million, and long-term we're looking at 5.7 million.
So that concludes our presentation. We won't have time to address agenda item 4, which is the governor's updates and the CCPS budget priorities. I do want to share with you, however, you have a copy of our budget priorities. They were included not only in your folder, but of course in your board packets, but we also conducted a town hall meeting, which was on Facebook Live, that you can access all of our descriptions of the budget priorities online. So hopefully that will help provide some great insight to you. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Dr. Calveric. And with that, we want to be mindful of our norms. And so, Mr. Underwood, we presented our carryover funds for FY 18, 19, and 20, revisiting our year 3 of our compensation study and our FY 2022 capital improvement plan. So at this time, we are prepared with our senior staff here to assist to answer any questions that you may have for the board.
Thank you, Dr. Rollins, Dr. Calveric, and staff. I thought it was, I appreciate you being mindful of the time.
Yes, sir.
We wanted the information. We wanted to have time to digest it. We got it in a timely manner to go through it, take a look at it. So at this time, I'm going to start with our board members. If you have any questions, I'll start with Mr. Forehand. If you have any questions regarding the presentation or anything regarding the work session? No? Okay. Mr. Thomas?
Yes, I do. And I've got a few just trying to take notes. Is there a healthcare increase in the budget for this year?
We are budgeting for a 0% increase.
And you got that from your consultant?
We met with our consultant this past week, and 0 is what was recommended in terms of budgeting at this time. We do not secure our final premium information from the local choice until late February.
That's great to know. Thank you.
It is very exciting. We're celebrating that as well.
One of the things that is often overlooked in your budget is the increased revenue that you get from other places. You didn't highlight that in this presentation. Is there a way you can let us know what that is?
Are you speaking in relation to the governor's updates?
No, the budget that you have, because some of your budget is based on lottery proceeds, sales tax,
Yes,
and
sir.
things like that, and those numbers increase without the knowledge of our board.
Yes.
So it may look like you got all this extra money at the end of the year, but in reality, you got some extra revenue, so.
I'm going to pass the torch to Mrs. Stevens, who has the nitty-gritty details for you.
Certainly. So we are still in the process of doing our budget. So the revenues have not been calculated at this time. I do project calculations on new revenues every year, and they are presented in a detailed format of the revenue stream, sales or state tax, federal tax, other revenue, and local revenues are presented in the budget presentation when we come to the Board of Supervisors.
But do you have the numbers from last year, since we just got our audit last month? Do you have what you saw an increase in from last year's budget?
Certainly, and we'll project any increases this year for the FY22 budget based on what we received last year.
Is it possible you could let us know what you got last year that was an increase? That's what I'm
Certainly.
trying to find out.
Sure, we can email that to you with no problem. Thank you.
That's good. The other thing is, did you, you mentioned budget priorities. Did you prioritize the CIP project?
Yes, we utilized, and I certainly can have Mr. Caldwell step forward, or Mrs. Stevens, the Chief Operations Officer, address this, but we did utilize the system that Mr. Fincham shares, which requires prioritization of CIP projects. Having said that, what we're hopeful is that, you know, you will have a very skinny version of a CIP rolling forward if we are able to gain access to the carryover funds in February. And so our goal would be, of course, to begin with as many projects that could be completed by June 30, and then to roll those funds naturally into the new fiscal year. But you have right within your documents the items that we hope to accomplish, but then those remaining items for the FY22 process, which would be prioritized for you.
These you gave us are not the prioritized versions.
No, we did not provide you with what was submitted to Mr. Fincham, but we can certainly give that to you if that's something you'd like access to, or
Yeah,
Mr.
that's
Fincham
great.
can provide it.
And I think that'd be great for all of us.
Sure, absolutely.
So in
That was-
submitting our CIP, we use Mr. Fincham's criteria and his forms. So all of it is submitted onto the smart sheet scale that the county is using, and it's in that data. So we can provide those.
With all due respect to Mr. Fincham and his process, it may help me personally if I see what you think are your top
Right.
priorities.
Absolutely. I was
Rather
just
than what
saying
we've got.
they're based on his priority categories
Right.
that we slotted them into.
All right, and the last thing that I had was on your CIP projects, like the bleachers and things like that, did you have RFP estimates, or is that just a best guess?
A lot of them are based on quotes that we received. They are not out for bid, but they're quotes that we're receiving.
Many of those were processed over the last couple of years in relation to being submitted as prior CIP requests. And so Mr. Caldwell would, of course, follow procurement laws associated with getting bids out if we are granted the opportunity to move forward.
Oh, yeah, and you know, my point was just to see if you had a quote that said such and such was gonna be, like the roof repair was gonna be $350,000.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
that's an estimate based on past roof repairs, which
Right.
may or may not be. Right.
Yes, sir.
That's all I had, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Seeley,
I don't have anything at this time.
Ms. Long,
I just have one quick question, my mask is still on my earring. The Anthem funds, were those, where did that money come from? Is that left over from when the policy for self-insurance was cashed in?
So when the organization switched from a self-funded plan to a fully insured, quasi-insured state plan, the funds that were eliminated or returned back to are the runoff claims, and then any remaining funds were the ones that we received. So yes, those are the ones that were remaining after all claims had been paid for that plan year.
So, I guess my feeling is that teachers paid in that money for insurance. I feel like using that should be doing something to help the teachers. So I'm encouraged that you're saying it's going to be a 0% increase. However, I know you've had trouble with increase in rates, and I almost feel like I'm taking something that's not mine to fix things that does not belong to the teachers. So just consider that. I know you have needs, but that one really bothers me a little bit because I know they got hit hard after a decision was made that they had no control of, or you did because you weren't here, on the insurance. So that's something that I just think we need to consider.
Mr. Black, I think Mr. Black is in Zoom, on Zoom. Mr. Black, you have any question or
Yeah.
comment?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Edwards. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple for the time being. We had talked about, I remember specifically asking a question in last year's conversation about the buses, and the buses had air conditioning, and we were buying buses that had air conditioning, and they said no, it was too expensive. And then I seen the CIP that we're spending money to retrofit air conditioned buses. So I'm just kind of curious, are we moving forward when we buy buses as a county to have them air conditioned?
I'm going to ask Eric Childs, our Supervisor of Transportation, to address your question.
Certainly. Okay. So currently, right now, we put in the CIP to start purchasing buses with air conditioning. This last set did not have air conditioning. The cost to add air conditioning to each bus is roughly $10,000 per bus. So the budget, what we had to work with, did not reflect the amount that it would cost to purchase buses with air conditioning. So that's why we put in to have buses retrofitted. And the cost is still the same to retrofit a bus. So it's still $10,000 per bus to retrofit. So right now, as the budget looks, we do not have, or we weren't granted money to purchase buses with air conditioning. So keep in mind, if we want to do that, each bus is going to be roughly $113,000 a piece if we want to add air conditioning.
So our
Okay,
desire,
hold on.
sorry.
Is that more?
That's more than what we currently, right now we're spending $103,007 per bus, and that's for a 77 passenger bus. To add air conditioning to that, it's going to be $10,000 more per bus.
Moving forward, is the plan to buy buses with air conditioning?
Yes.
So in the CIP that we presented this year to Mr. Fincham and the planning department, the 5 buses do include the cost of air conditioning.
Okay. And then the only other question I have for right now, and it deals with the CIP thing as well. When we had talked about, the last time we had the Senior Citizens Gala in high school, we had talked about Dr. Calvera, about people going into the bathrooms there and how that they were not nearly adequate for someone coming into the high school. You have this brand new facility, and then your bathrooms is like stepping back in time to the 1970s. And I thought that was going to be, it was my understanding that would be addressed somewhere, and I maybe I missed it, but I did not see that.
I do recall that conversation, Mr. Black. It did not get submitted by our buildings or our departments in terms of CIP budget priorities. So when the requests were submitted, we evaluate each of those in terms of whether they meet the criteria for CIP or capital outlay. And that was not a submission. So as a result, it does not find its way into what is presented. That doesn't mean that it doesn't continue to be a need. It just didn't rise above the importance of some of the others that our administrative teams elected to present.
All right. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Dr. Calvera, I had a little bit of an issue with that just because of the fact that, I mean, I understand the needs and wants, but when we're talking about turf on a football field versus bathrooms that every student has to use, I think we have to look at our priorities there. So that's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. My two comments are, Dr. Calveric, I'll go back and, I think there's a little misunderstanding about the 2018, 213,000 money. You were saying it's Anthem, but I think it's just in one pot, and we'll take a look at that. And the money's for the compensation study and how it was spent. I think there's some question about the money's there. I think we'll need to further that conversation about the money that was spent for those are my two concerns.
Great, so I would
further discussion.
I would invite you as a board, if you have specific questions, let us know so that we can send you information that you need in the interim time. Do I hear that there is a willingness and an openness to see both of these items that we've requested for inclusion on the February 9th board agenda to be placed in the consent section of the agenda?
No.
So how do we proceed from here? Because both of these are timely and they're essential that evening. I'm also presenting the FY22 budget.
The board we're going to have a work session. We're going to go through your CIP requests. We're going to take a look at all the funding streams and how we choose to do that as a board. And this board will make that decision. And we'll move from there. We'll move fairly quickly, but we'll do it in a work session. We have work sessions planned, and once we do that, we'll further the information to you.
What is the date of the pending work session?
Mr. Cully, did we say the
third is.
that's solar? That's solar.
So
I think it's the. I talked to
I
Mr.
think
Cully.
we're looking at the first Tuesday in March, which I think is the 2nd of March, to try to have a work session.
Right. So the board budget session, we haven't written it in stone yet. We're going to talk about tonight as an agenda item about the next work session for budget to include all of their requests, all of the other requests from all the other departments. I just want to mention to Dr. Fells, Dr. Calveric, please remember that, we have a number of requests that are coming to us, a number of critical issues that we must resolve as well. And this board, I appreciate everything that's here. I think it was very well thought of, very well put together. I appreciate getting the information early. Give us the time to digest and go through this. Other departments are putting their requests together and going to be sending them to us. And at that time, we will then do our work session and go through and look at all the monies that were promised to you and how it's going to be, the reversion funds and how that's going to happen. As Mr. Thomas talked about, the prioritization of certain things. Mr. Black talked about the bathrooms at the school, which I think is a priority. So we'll have some discussion about our feelings in terms of priority, and we'll try to meet in the middle.
Sure, absolutely. I hear what you're saying. So I would like to just close out by making a couple of statements, and then maybe Dr. Rollins-Fells would like to interject. Mrs. Stevens, did you have something you wanted to share?
I just wanted to clarify for Mr. Underwood that with the Anthem money listed on here, there was no intention of me segregating that.
Okay.
That is all in the CAFR under the fund balance for the school system. I just delineated it for our reference here. There is no Anthem money remaining at this time. It is all in the fund balance on the CAFR statement.
Thank you.
I have a question for clarity, just in terms of timelines. So with the work session that you all are having on March the 2nd, what does that do for our timeline of when we actually make the presentation?
We still were planning on the schools making your budget presentation in February in a school board work session. February, I think it's 23rd, but whatever the
February 23rd.
4th Tuesday of February. That would be a school-only work session. The work session Mr. Underwood was talking about is the work session on the county budget.
Okay, so I think that what I would ask as the chair is that if we can be sensitive to the timeliness of conversation about carryover funds from 18 and 19 and 20, so that we can then plan appropriately and make sure that we're being fiscally responsible.
We will be sensitive about making the promises.
That's understood. And then I have in terms of action items, Mr. Underwood,
Yes.
coming from this group, that there's a request for an update on the revenue source from last year. Make sure I worded that correctly. Floyd, you want an
The
updated
increases
number?
in revenue streams.
Just so we can all understand where your revenue increased last year.
Okay,
Not an indictment or anything, just to make sure folks know that X happened, which is why you had X amount of money left over.
understood. And the second action item for us is a prioritization of the CIP. That was the other request. Are there any other requests from this board so that we can respond timely?
Can you also give us your projected ADM? Is that right? I get one.
ADM.
I always mess them up.
You're right, at 80.
4010.
Going up or down.
At this time, we're looking at 4010.
What was it? Last year, I don't guess we count this, can we count this year?
For FY21, we are currently budgeted at 4055. We are targeting and budget projecting right now at 4025.
That's a happy number. That's a meeting. Dr. Rollins, so any other questions from your board members?
Are there any other questions from my board? All right.
Dr. Rollins-Fells and Dr. Calvary and board members, certainly want to thank you for all of your input. We will definitely work through these numbers. We're going to be very diligent. We're going to be do our due diligence to make sure that we do everything that we can for schools and for our children. I do have a couple of concerns, but it centers around broadband and some other things I like to see, but we'll talk about that at a later date. I don't have any other questions. For me, if there's no other questions or concerns, motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
I guess, so it's been properly moved and second that we adjourn to our January 26th meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.